The academy was a city of towers and metal walkways, floating above the clouds of a blue and purple gas giant. Cadets of every species moved through the corridors, their voices a chorus of clicks, hums, growls, and speech. Some glided on anti-gravity pads, others hopped on springy legs, and a few walked like humans, but none looked quite like Alina Ward. She was small, her brown hair tied back in a simple braid, her uniform a little too big for her thin frame. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, the kind that came from knowing every weakness in herself and learning to survive despite it. Humans were new to the Galactic Unity Academy. Their species had only joined the Interstellar Alliance a few decades ago, and most aliens had trouble taking them seriously. Some found humans fascinating for their ingenuity, while others simply ignored them, considering them fragile and slow. Alina had grown up hearing both opinions. She had learned to trust the first and ignore the second. The first day of her academy training was like stepping into a storm. The other cadets were faster, stronger, and taller. They could crush her with a hand or slice her with claws. She quickly learned that she would not win by brute strength. She would win by planning, observing, and using her body in ways no one expected. Her instructors had told her, "Humans survive." That is your advantage. She had taken those words seriously. Her first encounters had been strange. In the dining hall, alien cadets had stared at her plate of processed protein, unsure how to react. Some whispered that humans were delicate and soft. Others wondered why the academy had accepted someone so weak. Alina had smiled politely, taken her tray, and eaten quietly. She had understood immediately that one mistake here could make her life miserable. But it wasn't just the whispers that tested her. The one who made her days difficult in ways whispers never could was Krexil. Krexil was from a warrior species called the Gorthan. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in thick, ridged skin that could resist most energy weapons. He had been trained to dominate from birth. His eyes, black with golden pupils, seemed to see weakness as easily as seeing light. The first time Krexil approached Alina, he had laughed when she failed to lift the sparring weights. "You call yourself a cadet," he had said. Other cadets had laughed, following his lead. Alina had ignored him, pretending not to hear, and had completed her exercise in silence. She had been small, yes, but she had survived. Krexil did not give up. Each day, he found ways to remind everyone that humans were inferior. He would trip her in the corridors, push her during group drills, and sometimes shout insults across the classrooms. The instructors were mostly too busy to notice, or too tolerant of his behavior, thinking it part of a test. Alina understood that Krexil wanted a reaction, something to confirm that she belonged nowhere in this place. But she had learned that humans could endure far more than anyone imagined. One afternoon, the cadets were assigned a combat simulation. Alina had been paired with Krexil, which caused a ripple of excitement across the hall. Everyone expected the match to be brief and one-sided. Krexil grinned, flexing his massive arms. Alina stayed calm. She had been training for moments like this, mentally mapping his strength and predicting his attacks. Her plan was simple: survive, learn, and adapt. The simulation field was a large platform, lined with energy barriers. Hollow targets projected harmless projectiles for the cadets to dodge, and sensors measured force, speed, and reflexes. The instructors observed from above, confident that the rules would prevent injury. They did not know Krexil as well as they thought. As the simulation began, Krexil lunged at Alina with raw power, his strikes fast and heavy. She ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding a punch that could have shattered bones. Her heart raced, but her mind stayed calm. She noticed every pattern in his movement: the way his left foot shifted before he swung, the brief pause before he lunged, the pressure he applied with his claws. She memorized it all. Krexil laughed again, a deep, rumbling sound. "Come on, human, show me what you've got." His attacks grew faster, harsher, less predictable. Alina's small body was thrown from side to side. Her muscles screamed in pain and bruises bloomed across her arms, but she refused to fall completely. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her surrender. The crowd of cadets watched, some with curiosity, others with disbelief. No human had lasted this long against a Gorthan warrior before. They had assumed that the match would be over within moments. But Alina had other plans. She adjusted her stance, letting her smaller size become an advantage. She could duck, weave, and slip past attacks that would have caught larger cadets. Her strikes were not about power, they were about precision. She targeted joints, balance points, and weak grips. Krexil's attacks slowed slightly, frustration creeping into his movements. He had never faced an opponent who could endure as much as Alina did. He had expected a human to break or cry for mercy. Instead, she adapted, turning his strength into something she could redirect. Above the platform, the instructor finally noticed something unusual. He shouted for Krexel to stop, for Alina to step back. But the words came too late. The fight had grown beyond the simulation. Krexel was angry and Alina was determined. Every strike, every move became a lesson in endurance and strategy. Alina's mind raced. She had studied her species' weaknesses, yes, but she had also studied its strengths. Humans could endure pain in ways other species could not. She remembered stories from her ancestors of survival in harsh environments, of facing predators with nothing but wit and courage. She drew on that memory, letting the instincts of survival guide her movements. She blocked a swing with her forearm, rolled, and used his momentum to nudge him off balance. Krexel stumbled, barely recovering before striking again. Cadets around them whispered, some holding their breath. Alina's small body moved with fluidity, every dodge and counter a reminder that humans were unpredictable, even to those who considered themselves superior. The fight continued for several minutes, longer than anyone expected. Krexel's frustration grew and he began making mistakes. His swings became overreaching, leaving him vulnerable. Alina noticed immediately, exploiting tiny gaps, pushing just enough to create openings. She was not trying to win with force. She was testing, learning, surviving. Finally, Krexel faltered. He had underestimated the human's endurance and adaptability. Alina saw her chance. She performed a quick maneuver, using his momentum to trip him slightly, then dodged his follow-up. Krexel's heavy body landed with a thud, startling everyone. The instructor finally intervened, shouting that the simulation was over. Alina was breathing hard, her uniform torn in a few places, bruises forming, but she was standing. Krexel glared, humiliated, as the crowd absorbed what had just happened. No one spoke for a moment. The silence was thick with disbelief. Humans were supposed to be fragile. They were supposed to crumble under pressure. And yet here she was, bruised, exhausted, but alive and unbroken. Cadets shifted uncomfortably, realizing that their assumptions had been wrong. Alina did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply took a deep breath, adjusted her braid, and stepped down from the platform. Her victory was quiet, subtle, but it carried a message that every cadet would remember: never underestimate a human. Survival was a strength, endurance was a weapon, and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. Later, in the corridors of the academy, whispers spread. Some cadets looked at her with newfound respect. Others avoided her gaze, unwilling to admit that their prejudice had been wrong. Krexel's anger was palpable, though he concealed it behind a scowl. He had learned a lesson he did not want. Humans could not be measured by physical strength alone. The instructors convened privately, reviewing the simulation's recordings. They realized how close things had come to serious injury and how Alina had turned the situation into a learning moment. She had survived against overwhelming odds, not by brute force but by intelligence, timing, and endurance. They had underestimated what humans could do, and the cost of that underestimation was evident. Alina returned to her quarters, her body sore but her spirit intact. She reflected on the day's events, understanding that she had just changed the perception of humans in the academy. She had not sought attention, but she had earned it. And deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. Krexel would try again, and the academy would continue to test her. But she had proven to herself first and foremost that humans could endure, adapt, and survive when faced with challenges that seemed impossible. As night fell over the floating towers, the lights of the academy shimmered across the clouds. Alina lay on her bed, muscles aching, bruises throbbed softly, but her mind raced with strategies for the future. Humans might be small, fragile, or underestimated by other species, but they had something the others did not: relentless determination. And determination, she knew, was stronger than any claw, any muscle, any psionic gift. The academy had just received a lesson in human resilience, whether they realized it yet or not. And Alina Ward, the quiet, unassuming human girl, had become the first proof that humans belonged in this universe, not because they were like everyone else, but because they were different, resourceful, and unbreakable. The next morning, the academy was buzzing in a way it rarely had before. Cadets whispered in corners, peers glanced at Alina with cautious curiosity, and even instructors seemed to look at her differently. The recording of the previous day's combat simulation had spread faster than anyone expected. A human had endured Krexel Gorthan's attacks. Not just endured, but had adapted, survived, and made the bigger, stronger warrior falter. Alina walked through the corridors quietly, keeping her head down. She did not need praise, and she did not seek it. The stares and murmurs were enough. She noticed Krexel ahead, blocking the walkway with his massive frame. His jaw tightened as he caught sight of her. Unlike yesterday, his expression was unreadable. Some cadets would have called it anger, others frustration, but Alina had learned to read beyond surface expressions. He was calculating now, thinking, planning how to humiliate her again. When she passed, Krexel's voice rumbled low, enough for only her to hear. "You survived once. Don't think it will happen again." She kept walking, knowing that his threats were empty until he could turn them into action. He would try again, and when he did, she had to be ready. That afternoon, the instructors announced a new assignment, a mixed-species combat drill. Cadets would train in pairs, with each match pushing them slightly beyond their abilities. The academy insisted on safety protocols, and instructors would observe from above. Krexel was paired with Alina again. A ripple of excitement passed through the hall. Some cadets were eager to see the human crushed, others secretly wondered if she could repeat her performance. The simulation platform hummed as the barriers activated. Hollow targets flickered across the floor and the sensors warmed up, tracking every move. Instructors gave their standard briefing. "This is training. No one is to cause permanent harm. Observe the rules." Krexel's eyes glinted, ignoring the words. He had learned that rules were suggestions to be bent when advantage could be gained. The platform lowered into place and the drill began. Immediately, Krexel charged, faster than before. His strength had not diminished overnight, but Alina had a plan. She ducked, sidestepped, and dodged with a grace that seemed almost unnatural for someone of her size. Her focus was razor-sharp. Every twitch of Krexel's muscles, every shift in his weight, told her where he would strike next. The initial moments were chaotic. Krexel's strikes were faster and more brutal than before, and Alina felt the impact of several hits. Her ribs ached, and a bruise was already forming on her shoulder. Yet she moved with precision, using his momentum against him. A flick of her wrist, a quick pivot, and Krexel stumbled slightly, barely catching himself. Cadets in the observation gallery whispered. Some were shocked, others impressed. No human had survived multiple drills against a Gorthan, let alone adapted to their style. Alina was not thinking about impressing anyone. She was thinking about surviving, learning, and planning for the moment when the fight would truly matter. Krexel's frustration grew. Every strike that should have ended the match failed. He adjusted his attacks, combining brute force with speed, hoping to land one that Alina could not recover from. She felt pain from each blow, but her mind remained clear. Pain, she knew, was temporary. Strategy was forever. The instructor on the observation deck frowned. He could see the fight escalating beyond normal parameters. Krexel's attacks were no longer following the simulation rules. Energy strikes were landing harder than expected, and Alina's small frame was bending and twisting in ways that put her at real risk. He reached for the control panel to stop the drill, but hesitated. If he intervened now, it might teach Krexel to expect safety nets. If he waited, the human girl might demonstrate something extraordinary or be seriously hurt. Alina felt herself pushed to the edge. She could see Krexel's pattern clearly now. His left foot shifted before every lunge, his right claw flicked at the same time as his energy pulse. She began to anticipate, predicting moves before they happened. With each attack, she adapted, learning faster than her opponent could adjust. Suddenly, Krexel swung too wide. Alina rolled, using the motion to propel herself behind him. With a quick maneuver, she tripped him, making him stumble forward. The crowd gasped. The larger cadets froze, uncertain if they had witnessed a mistake or something far more deliberate. Krexel's massive frame hit the platform floor with a heavy thud, his balance temporarily broken. Alina did not strike blindly. She paused, breathing hard, muscles burning, calculating her next move. Humans had a way of thinking through problems while under extreme stress. Other species often reacted with pure instinct. Alina combined instinct with analysis, a combination no one expected. She nudged Krexel back, forcing him to recover in a way that favored her. Krexel's eyes narrowed. He realized too late that brute strength alone would not suffice. Alina's endurance, her capacity to absorb pain and keep moving, was unmatched. She did not fight him head-on. She used his own power against him, redirecting momentum, exploiting gaps, and targeting balance points. Her small strikes caused disproportionate effects because she understood leverage and timing in ways Krexel did not expect. The instructor finally pressed the emergency stop. A loud alarm echoed, lights flashing red. He descended to the platform, moving fast but unable to prevent the climax of the fight. By the time he arrived, Elena had already maneuvered Krexel into a corner, controlling his movement with precision rather than power. Krexel glared at her, disbelief mixing with frustration. You survived again." His voice was low, almost a growl. He had underestimated her endurance, her intelligence, and her ability to adapt. Elena's body ached. Bruises covered her arms and shoulders, her lungs burned, and sweat stung her eyes. Yet she stood tall, breathing steadily, her mind still clear. She did not smile, did not gloat. She only nodded once, acknowledging the fight, the lesson, and the unspoken respect between them. The other cadets slowly exhaled, realizing what had just happened. A human had not only survived against a Gorthan, but had adapted, endured, and forced the larger warrior into a position of disadvantage. The Academy's assumptions about strength, species, and ability were being challenged in real time. Krexel backed away, still furious but also cautious. He had learned something he did not want to know. Humans could survive far beyond what anyone expected. They could endure pain, remain calm under pressure, and turn disadvantage into opportunity. In the eyes of many cadets, the notion that humans were weak began to crumble. The instructor shook his head, both frustrated and impressed. He had waited too long to intervene, allowing the simulation to escalate. In doing so, he had witnessed a demonstration of human resilience that would be remembered throughout the Academy. He made a mental note to revise training protocols, to account for species that did not behave according to expected limits. Elena had forced everyone to rethink their understanding of strength. Later in the locker rooms, Elena tended to her bruises and minor injuries. She reflected on the fight, replaying it in her mind. Every movement, every adjustment, every decision had been crucial. Humans could be underestimated, but that underestimation was their advantage. They were unpredictable, adaptable, and determined. Her fellow human cadets watched quietly, inspired but silent. They had seen what Elena had endured and survived. She had demonstrated that their species could stand shoulder to shoulder with warriors who were physically superior, relying on intelligence, endurance, and strategy rather than brute force alone. Krexel, meanwhile, retreated to his quarters, nursing both physical soreness and bruised pride. He had faced a human before, but never like this. The girl was smaller, yes, but she had survived his assault with a combination of willpower and skill that defied expectations. He could not fully understand her, and that was what made her dangerous. The Academy itself seemed changed, though the instructors would not admit it yet. Rules would need adjustment. Observation protocols would need to be stricter. The assumption that humans were weak was no longer tenable. Elena had proven something fundamental. Survival, endurance, and intelligence were just as valuable as raw strength. As evening fell, the floating towers cast long shadows across the clouds below. Elena sat quietly on her bed, muscles sore, mind alert. She understood that Krexel would not stop, that others would test her limits, and that every day at the Academy would be a challenge. But she also understood that she had a strength no one else possessed. The ability to endure, to think clearly under pressure, and to survive against odds that others assumed would crush her. Humans were underestimated. That was their greatest weapon. And Elena Ward, small, determined, and unbroken, would make sure everyone at the Academy remembered it. The next morning, the Academy was quieter than usual. Cadets whispered in hushed tones as they passed through the corridors, glancing at Elena. Some looked at her with new respect, others with suspicion. She had survived Krexel's attacks twice now. The word spread quickly. The human girl was not just strong in spirit, she was dangerous in ways no one had expected. Elena moved through the halls deliberately, keeping her pace steady. She did not seek attention, and yet the stares followed her. Every cadet, regardless of species, seemed to measure her silently. She ignored them, focusing on her own thoughts. Her body still bore bruises from the previous drills, her muscles sore, but her mind was clear. She had survived, adapted, and learned, and she knew that Krexel would not stop until he regained his pride. Krexel was waiting for her near the training platform. His massive arms were crossed, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. When he saw her, a flicker of recognition passed across his face, but it was quickly replaced by determination. He would not allow this human to humiliate him again. He had trained his whole life to dominate, and a single small species should not be able to outmaneuver him. "You survived again," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "But today it ends." "We'll see," she replied softly. She had learned to remain composed, even in the face of threats. Her strength lay in endurance and strategy, not in loud words or displays of power. The instructor called the cadets to the simulation platform for another drill. This time, the scenario was more complex. The platform would shift, holographic obstacles would appear, and cadets had to navigate and fight simultaneously. It was designed to test reflexes, coordination, and adaptability. As the platform lowered, Alina studied every detail. The shifting floor, the holographic barriers, the timing of the moving targets. She memorized patterns and calculated how to use them to her advantage. Krexel, on the other hand, seemed confident. He relied on his natural strength, assuming that raw power would carry him through. The drill began. Krexel lunged immediately, moving faster than before. Alina sidestepped, rolling past his strike. Her small frame allowed her to navigate the shifting platform more easily than his larger body. She used the holographic barriers as cover, letting Krexel's momentum work against him. The other cadets watched in amazement. Krexel's attacks were precise and brutal, designed to overpower almost anyone. But Alina was adapting in real time, predicting his movements and avoiding the strongest blows. She was small, yes, but she was not weak. Every dodge, every pivot, every strike she made was calculated, turning Krexel's strength into a liability. Krexel's frustration grew. He could not understand how a human could endure so much and still remain composed. His attacks became reckless, leaving openings that Alina exploited. She moved quickly, tripping him with subtle pushes and using his momentum to control the fight. The instructor observed from above, growing increasingly concerned. The drill was escalating beyond safe limits. Krexel's attacks were stronger than allowed, and Alina was showing no signs of yielding. He pressed the emergency stop button, but the system lagged slightly. By the time the platform's force fields activated, the fight had already reached a critical point. Alina saw the instructor's intervention too late, or perhaps she ignored it. Her focus remained on Krexel, who was larger, stronger, and faster than any opponent she had faced. She understood that victory would not come from brute force but from exploiting weaknesses and using her own endurance to outlast him. She noticed a pattern in Krexel's attacks. He shifted his weight to the right before every strike, and his left claw moved slightly slower than his right. She used this to her advantage, dodging the strike and redirecting his energy. Krexel stumbled, momentarily off balance. Alina took the opportunity to maneuver behind him, controlling his movement without striking directly. The cadets in the observation gallery gasped. They had never seen such precision from a human. Alina was not attacking with brute force. She was attacking with intelligence, patience, and endurance. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, and efficient. She was turning her opponent's power into a disadvantage, a concept many species had difficulty understanding. Krexel realized too late that his strength alone would not win this fight. His frustration turned into anger, clouding his judgment. He lunged again, faster and harder, but Alina anticipated the movement. She sidestepped, using his momentum to force him into a corner of the platform. His massive arms flailed, seeking balance, but Alina remained calm, adjusting her stance with each shift of his weight. The instructor finally arrived at the platform, shouting for the fight to end. His voice echoed across the hall, but Alina ignored it. She had learned to focus on the immediate challenge, not distractions. The fight had become a test of endurance, strategy, and resilience. She had to survive, adapt, and control the moment before it ended. Krexel's attacks were relentless. He struck with claws, fists, and energy pulses, each one stronger than the last. Alina felt pain with every hit, but she refused to break. Humans had a unique capacity for endurance, and she drew on it fully. Her movements were precise, exploiting small openings, redirecting energy, and maintaining control. She was a blur of motion, dodging, pivoting, and striking at critical points. The crowd watched in stunned silence. A human had survived multiple attacks from a Gorthan, adapting and controlling the fight in ways no one had expected. Cadets began to question everything they had assumed about strength, species, and ability. Humans were fragile, yes, but fragile did not mean weak. Endurance, intelligence, and adaptability were weapons in themselves. Krexel's eyes widened in disbelief. He had underestimated Alina's capacity to endure and adapt. He had relied on raw strength and aggression, only to find that it could be countered by patience, precision, and resilience. Every strike that should have ended the match failed. Every maneuver Alina executed forced him to adjust, leaving him vulnerable and frustrated. Alina felt her muscles burning, her lungs aching, but her mind remained sharp. She analyzed Krexel's movements, predicting his next strike and preparing to counter it. Humans had survived in harsh environments for generations, enduring pain, hunger, and danger. That instinct for survival gave her an edge that Krexel could not anticipate. Finally, Krexel overreached. He lunged with a powerful strike, leaving his balance exposed. Alina rolled to the side, using his momentum to trip him slightly. Krexel stumbled, barely recovering before striking again. Alina remained calm, breathing steadily, her body moving with precision. She was not trying to win with force. She was trying to control the fight, survive, and teach her opponent a lesson he would not forget. The instructor arrived at the platform, raising his hands to stop the drill. The alarms sounded, lights flashed, and force fields activated. Krexel froze, realizing that he had been outmaneuvered. Alina stood, bruised and exhausted, but composed. She had survived, adapted, and controlled the fight without relying on raw strength. The crowd erupted in quiet whispers. No human had ever demonstrated such endurance and intelligence in combat. Krexel glared at her, a mixture of frustration and grudging respect in his eyes. He had underestimated her, as had many others. Alina's victory was quiet but undeniable. She had survived against impossible odds, using her mind and body in ways no one expected. Later in the training hall, instructors reviewed the drill. They acknowledged that they had underestimated both Krexel and Alina. Safety protocols had been stretched, but the lesson was clear. Humans were not weak. Their endurance, adaptability, and intelligence made them formidable opponents, capable of surviving situations that would overwhelm other species. Alina tended to her injuries in the infirmary. Bruises covered her arms and shoulders, her ribs ached, and fatigue weighed heavily on her body. Yet she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had survived again, demonstrating that humans could endure, adapt, and overcome challenges that others believed impossible. Krexel retreated to his quarters, nursing both physical soreness and bruised pride. He had faced a human before, but never one like Alina. She was small, yes, but she had survived his attacks with a combination of strategy, endurance, and precision that defied expectations. He could not fully understand her, and that made her dangerous. The academy itself seemed to change, though no one would admit it openly. Rules would need adjustment. Observation protocols would need revision. The assumption that humans were fragile and weak was no longer tenable. Alina had proven that survival, intelligence, and adaptability could rival raw strength. That evening, as the floating towers cast long shadows across the gas clouds below, Alina sat quietly on her bed. She reflected on the day's events, replaying every maneuver, every dodge, every subtle push. Humans had a unique advantage: the ability to endure, think clearly under pressure, and adapt to unexpected situations. That advantage had carried her through multiple encounters with Krexel, a warrior stronger and larger than anyone she had faced. She understood that the fights were far from over. Krexel would try again, and others would test her limits. But she also understood that she had proven something fundamental. Humans belonged in this universe not because they were like other species, but because they were different, resourceful, and unbreakable. As the lights of the academy shimmered across the clouds, Alina closed her eyes, muscles sore but spirit unbroken. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she was ready. Humans were underestimated, and that underestimation was their greatest weapon. And Alina Ward, small, determined, and unyielding, would make sure the academy remembered it. The academy corridors were unusually tense that morning. Cadets whispered as they moved past Alina, and some avoided her gaze entirely. Her previous encounters with Krexel had made her infamous. Humans were underestimated, yes, but she had already proven that they could survive what most species thought impossible. She walked steadily, her posture calm, though her muscles still ached from the previous drills. She had learned that showing fatigue was a signal for others to exploit. Krexel was waiting again, leaning against the railing of the training platform. His massive form cast a shadow over the floor below, and his eyes locked onto Alina the moment she entered the hall. He did not speak, only stared, calculating, planning. The other cadets gave him a wide berth. The air felt charged, as if a storm were about to break. Alina approached him, her stride unhurried. "Good morning," she said softly. Krexel did not answer. Instead, he turned and strode toward the simulation arena, gesturing for her to follow. She obeyed, her mind already analyzing every detail of the upcoming drill. The instructors had announced a new challenge: a multi-level combat course that combined physical obstacles, shifting platforms, and live simulations. This was a test of endurance, strategy, and adaptability, designed for the top cadets. The platform lowered into place, and Alina's gaze swept over the field. Holographic barriers flickered to life, moving in unpredictable patterns. Platforms shifted with sudden jerks, forcing cadets to adjust their balance constantly. Sensors monitored every movement, and instructors hovered above, confident that the safety protocols would prevent serious injury. Krexel approached Alina, his expression unreadable. "No mistakes this time," he said, voice low. "One wrong move and it ends." One slip could mean injury, even defeat. Her body ached, her bruises burned, yet her mind was clear. She had survived because she relied on endurance, intelligence, and adaptability. Today, she would need all three in equal measure. The drill began. Krexel lunged immediately, faster than before, aiming for a quick advantage. Alina sidestepped, rolling to the side and using her small size to navigate the shifting platforms. She ducked under holographic barriers and leveraged the moving floors to redirect Krexel's momentum. Every movement was precise, calculated, and efficient. The other cadets watched in silence. No human had ever performed like this under pressure. Alina moved like a shadow, slipping past attacks and redirecting force rather than resisting it head-on. Krexel's frustration was visible, his attacks growing more reckless as he tried to overwhelm her. The instructor above frowned. The drill was escalating beyond safe limits. Krexel's aggression had increased, and Alina's endurance allowed her to keep pace. The emergency stop was ready, but intervention might disrupt the demonstration of strategy and resilience. For a moment, he hesitated, watching as Alina adapted to every new challenge the course presented. Alina moved quickly across a shifting platform, her small frame allowing her to maintain balance where larger cadets might falter. Krexel followed, his weight causing the platform to tilt dangerously. She used his momentum against him, nudging him off balance without striking directly. His claws scraped against the floor, catching briefly on the edges, and he stumbled. Alina's movements were controlled, deliberate, turning every moment of chaos into an advantage. Cadets gasped. The human girl was controlling the fight, not through strength, but through precision, patience, and quick thinking. She was proving that humans could survive situations far beyond what most species expected. Krexel's eyes narrowed. He had underestimated the human's intelligence, endurance, and adaptability. Krexel lunged again, this time combining force with speed, aiming to catch Alina off guard. She anticipated the attack, ducking under his arm and using the platform's movement to redirect his energy. He stumbled, caught himself, and lunged again. The instructor's voice echoed across the platform, shouting for the drill to end. Alina ignored it. Her focus was total, her mind calculating, adapting, surviving. Krexel's attacks became more erratic. His frustration clouded his judgment, and Alina noticed the pattern immediately. He shifted his weight too heavily to the left before every strike, a subtle flaw he had not corrected. She adjusted her stance, rolling under a swing and nudging him forward, forcing him into a corner of the platform. Every move was precise, deliberate, and effective. The cadets in the gallery held their breath. No human had ever demonstrated such control and endurance in combat, especially against a Gorthan warrior. Alina moved with a combination of instinct and analysis, her small body weaving through attacks and exploiting openings. Every strike she avoided, every movement she made, demonstrated human resilience and intelligence. Krexel realized too late that brute strength alone would not win. Alina's endurance, adaptability, and precision forced him to react constantly. He struck faster, harder, but each attack created new openings that Alina exploited. She did not strike blindly. She controlled his movements, maintained balance, and conserved energy. Her goal was not to defeat him with force, but to survive and demonstrate control. The instructor pressed the emergency stop again, his voice rising over the platform's alarms. The barriers activated, and the floor shifted to immobilize the cadets. Krexel froze, breathing heavily, and Alina stood, bruised and exhausted, but composed. She had survived, adapted, and controlled the fight without relying on brute force. The gallery erupted in whispers and quiet cheers. Cadets could not deny what they had witnessed. A human had endured multiple attacks from a Gorthan warrior and maintained control of the fight through intelligence, endurance, and adaptability. Krexel backed away, glancing at Alina with a mix of frustration and respect. He had underestimated her, and that miscalculation had cost him control. Later, in the infirmary, Alina tended to her injuries. Her body ached, bruises covered her arms and shoulders, and her ribs throbbed, but her mind was calm. She had proven that humans could endure, adapt, and survive situations that others assumed would overwhelm them. Every bruise, every ache was a reminder of her resilience. Krexel retreated to his quarters, nursing both physical soreness and bruised pride. He could not understand how Alina had survived, and that made her dangerous. Every strategy he had tried failed, not because she was stronger, but because she was smarter, faster to adapt, and unyielding. He had faced humans before, but never one like her. The instructors convened privately, reviewing the drill. They realized they had underestimated both Krexil and Alina. Safety protocols had been stretched, yet the lesson was undeniable. Humans were not weak. Their endurance, adaptability, and intelligence allowed them to survive situations that would crush other species. Alina's performance challenged long-held assumptions about strength, skill, and survival. Even among her fellow human cadets, Alina's actions inspired awe. They had watched her navigate a complex combat course against one of the strongest cadets in the academy. She had survived, not through force, but through intelligence and endurance. They understood that human resilience was rare in this galaxy, a combination of physical adaptation and mental fortitude that other species often underestimated. As evening fell, the floating towers cast long shadows across the clouds below. Alina sat quietly on her bed, muscles sore, bruises aching, but her mind alert. She replayed the day's events in her mind, analyzing every movement, every choice, every subtle adjustment that had allowed her to survive. Humans were underestimated, yes, but that underestimation was their greatest weapon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and likely new attempts by Krexil to regain his pride. But Alina knew she was ready. She had endured, adapted, and survived before. She would do so again. Humans might be small and underestimated, but they were persistent, adaptable, and unbreakable, and Alina Ward would ensure that everyone at the academy remembered it. The lights of the academy shimmered across the clouds, reflecting off the metal towers like stars on the surface of a strange world. Alina closed her eyes, her body exhausted but her spirit unbroken. She understood something the instructors had yet to fully recognize. Humans survived not because they were like other species, but because they were different, resourceful, and resilient. Across the academy, cadets whispered about the human girl who had survived multiple encounters with a Gorthan warrior. Some admired her, some feared her, and others were simply uncertain how to classify her. But all agreed on one thing: Alina Ward was no ordinary human. She was a survivor, a strategist, and a living proof that humans could endure what others could not. And as the night deepened, Alina lay on her bed, her muscles aching, her mind racing with strategies for the future. She had survived again, and she knew that each day at the academy would bring new challenges. But she was ready. Humans might be underestimated, yes, but that underestimation was their greatest strength. And Alina Ward, small, determined, and unyielding, would continue to prove it, no matter the odds. The day dawned over the floating towers of the Galactic Unity Academy, painting the clouds below in shades of orange and violet. The academy was alive with activity, but there was a noticeable tension in the air. Cadets whispered as they passed Alina, and instructors walked with a careful eye on the training platforms. Everyone remembered the previous drills. The human girl had survived, adapted, and controlled fights that no one thought possible. Alina walked to the training area, her movements deliberate, calm, and steady. Her muscles ached from the prior drills, and bruises still marred her arms and shoulders, but her mind was sharp. She had learned to manage pain, to focus under pressure, and to turn every disadvantage into a tactical advantage. Humans survived, yes, but they thrived because they could endure when others would falter. Krexil was waiting, pacing near the platform. His massive form radiated tension. He had spent the night reviewing every move, every mistake, and every moment in which Alina had outmaneuvered him. Pride and frustration warred in his chest. Today he had decided he would reclaim his dominance and restore his reputation. "You're persistent, human," he growled, his deep voice echoing across the hall. "I'll give you that. But persistence isn't enough. Today it ends." This one was the most challenging yet. A multi-level combat arena with shifting platforms, moving obstacles, and simulated adversaries designed to test every skill the cadets had learned. Force sensors monitored every strike, every movement, and every impact. Safety protocols were in place, but the instructors knew that skill and strategy would decide the outcome more than brute strength. The platform lowered into place, and the field came alive. Holographic walls flickered in and out of existence, moving obstacles appeared without warning, and the entire arena shifted unpredictably. Alina's eyes swept over the field, memorizing patterns and calculating routes. She noted every platform, every potential hazard, and every opportunity to use her agility and intelligence to her advantage. Krexel lunged immediately as the drill began, striking with immense force. Alina dodged, rolling under his arm and using a shifting platform to redirect his momentum. She was small, yes, but her movements were precise, deliberate, and efficient. Krexel attacked again and again, each strike faster and harder, but Alina adapted instantly, reading his body, predicting his moves, and exploiting openings. The instructor watched from above, brow furrowed. He had observed the previous drills and knew the risks, but he also understood that this was a moment to witness true resilience. Alina was human, yes, but her endurance, intelligence, and adaptability were unlike anything he had seen in the academy. She was turning each of Krexel's attacks into opportunities, not threats. The cadets in the gallery gasped and whispered. No human had ever navigated the arena so skillfully. Alina was not just surviving, she was controlling the fight. Her small frame moved through shifting platforms, avoided obstacles, and redirected Krexel's power with precise maneuvers. She struck only when necessary, using technique and leverage rather than brute force. Krexel's frustration grew. His attacks became erratic, driven by pride and anger. He lunged too far, overcommitted, and Alina used his momentum against him. She pivoted, slipped past his claws, and nudged him into a corner of the arena. Krexel stumbled, recovering just in time to lunge again, but Alina had anticipated the movement. She dodged and shifted, keeping him off balance and controlling the pace of the fight. The instructor finally activated the emergency stop, but Alina's focus did not waver. She had already turned the fight into a lesson for everyone watching. Humans were underestimated, yes, but their endurance, strategy, and adaptability could overcome strength and size. Krexel realized too late that he was not facing a simple opponent. He was facing a human who had learned to survive, adapt, and control the moment against overwhelming odds. The cadets fell silent as Alina executed a final maneuver. She sidestepped a heavy strike, rolled under Krexel's arm, and used his momentum to guide him toward a holographic barrier, stopping him without striking him violently. Krexel froze, stunned, his pride shattered. He had expected raw strength to win, but he had been outmaneuvered, outlasted, and outsmarted. Alina stood, breathing steadily, her body bruised and tired, but her mind clear. She did not celebrate. She did not gloat. She had survived, controlled the fight, and demonstrated the strength of her species. Humans were small, yes, but they could endure, think strategically, and adapt when the odds were impossible. The gallery erupted in quiet murmurs and whispers of admiration. Cadets and instructors alike began to see humans differently. They were no longer the fragile species everyone had assumed. They were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of surviving situations that would overwhelm even the strongest warriors. Alina had proven that endurance and intelligence could surpass brute strength. Krexel stepped back, his chest heaving, pride wounded but respect growing. He had underestimated Alina, and in doing so, he had learned a vital lesson. Strength was not only measured in size or power. Persistence, adaptability, and strategy were equally, if not more, important. He could not undo the lesson, and he knew it. The instructors reviewed the footage later, acknowledging the extraordinary display of human resilience. They realized that the training protocols had been too rigid, failing to account for species that relied on intelligence and endurance rather than raw strength. Alina's performance had challenged assumptions, reshaped expectations, and proven that humans belonged in the academy not because they were like other species, but because they were different, resourceful, and unyielding. Alina returned to her quarters that evening, her muscles aching, her body covered in bruises, but her mind calm and focused. She reflected on the day's events, replaying every movement and decision. Humans had survived for generations in harsh environments, relying on endurance, adaptability, and strategy. That same instinct had carried her through multiple encounters with Krexel, a warrior far larger, stronger, and faster than she was. Her fellow human cadets watched quietly, inspired. Alina had shown them what their species was truly capable of. Survival, endurance, and adaptability were human strengths, and they could be applied even in the most extreme situations. Alina had become more than a cadet. She was proof that humans could thrive where others assumed they would fail. Krexel retreated to his quarters, reflecting on the day's events. His pride had been challenged, and he had been forced to acknowledge a truth he did not want to accept. Humans were not weak. They could endure, adapt, and overcome challenges in ways that few species could. Krexel realized that he could not dismiss humans or treat them as inferior again. Alina had changed the perception of her entire species in the academy. The instructors convened in private, discussing what they had witnessed. The Academy had underestimated humans, and Alina's performance had forced them to reconsider their training methods, observation protocols, and assumptions about strength and survival. She had survived multiple challenges not by brute force, but by endurance, intelligence, and adaptability, the very qualities that defined humanity in the galaxy. As night fell over the floating towers, Alina sat quietly on her bed, reflecting on everything that had happened. She knew that new challenges awaited her, that Krexel might try again, and that other cadets would test her limits. But she also knew that she had proven something vital. Humans were not weak, fragile, or inferior. They were resourceful, resilient, and unyielding. The Academy itself had been changed by her performance. Cadets whispered about the human girl who had survived multiple encounters with a Gorthan warrior. Some admired her, others feared her, but all recognized that she had demonstrated the unique strengths of her species. Alina had shown them that humans could endure, adapt, and survive when the odds were impossible. In the quiet of her quarters, Alina closed her eyes, her body sore but her spirit unbroken. She understood that her greatest strength lay not in her size, speed, or raw power, but in her ability to endure, think clearly under pressure, and adapt to challenges that others could not overcome. Humans had survived in harsh worlds for generations, and that instinct for survival had carried her through every encounter at the Academy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new opportunities to prove the strength of her species. But Alina knew she was ready. Humans might be underestimated, yes, but that underestimation was their greatest advantage. She had survived, adapted, and thrived against impossible odds, and she would continue to do so. As the stars glittered above the floating towers of the Academy, Alina Ward lay back on her bed, muscles aching, bruises throbbing, and mind racing with strategies for the future. She had survived every trial, demonstrated the unique strength of humanity, and reshaped the perception of her species in the Academy. Humans were underestimated, but that was their greatest weapon. Alina Ward, small, determined, and unyielding, had proven that endurance, intelligence, and adaptability could overcome strength, size, and expectation. And the Academy and the galaxy would not forget it.